Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 2, Chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore, where, spoiler warning, the MYTHOSAUR is no longer myth. Let's break down this episode scene by scene for all the Star Wars Easter eggs and details you missed in the mystery of the MYTHOSAUR. Cause yeah, we got questions. Also subscribe to our new channel, The Deep Dive, with even more pointed analyses of the titles you love, and you can support this growing network by grabbing some merch at nerdriot.shop, like our new Mandalorian-inspired The Way collection. We open on Tatooine in the city of Mos Eisley. Land speeders racing through the streets as fireworks pop overhead. Yes, they're using the same sound effect from the pod racers drifting in Phantom Menace. This race is part of the Boonta Eve celebration, a holiday celebrated on Tatooine with pod racing tournaments. It was actually the reason behind the pod race that led to Anakin's freedom.
There's a big race tomorrow on Boonta Eve.
Boonta Eve celebrates Boonta Histilic Shadru, who is a Hutt who ascended into godhood. In the town of Mos Eisley over on the left, you can see another speeder doing donuts in another courtyard, red banners suspended over the alleyways. Meanwhile, of the two racing speeders, the one in the lead bumps into the side and stalls out, allowing the one trailing him to take the lead. Amy Sedaris returns as Pelimoto, ripping off a Rodian. Her pit droids carry a pole. This is the same prop we saw the last time we were here in the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 5. This is the same pole that Han Solo used to try to brace the trash compactor walls on the Death Star at A New Hope. Among her droids is also a BD unit droid, the same type as BD-1, Cal Kestis' companion in Jedi Fallen Order and the upcoming Jedi Survivor. And a reminder that this red astromech R5D4 is the same one with the busted motivator that the Jawas tried to sell to Luke and Uncle Owen. Peli tells the Jawas to paint the stolen parts from this same speeder so that they look different. Painting the parts to look different. That is what the Mandalorian clan is doing with their Beskar pieces to differentiate each other. Their Beskar was stolen from them in the Purge, and now they are in the process of reassembling their multicolored fragments into something that can work together collectively. Grogu leaps out of the cockpit, and Peli says he leaps like a Lurman. Lurman are the mammals from Maigito, who have appeared a few times in Clone Wars. Grogu utters what sounds like a first word. Yeah, Peli says he said Peli, but it sounded more like bucket or Beckett. Beckett was Woody Harrelson's character in Solo: A Star Wars Story. I don't think Grogu knows him. I guess he could have met him in the early years, but Grogu utters a lot of stuff in this episode. He's just babbling up a storm. Peli asks if Din Djarin took on Boba Fett in the Hutts, and if the Hutts are back, referring to the Hutt twins that Boba Fett negotiated with in the Book of Boba Fett. Now, Peli has a gap in her teeth because she lost that tooth in the finale of the Book of Boba Fett, something that Amy Sedaris actually said was her improvised idea. Peli asks the Jawas if there's anywhere they can find an IG unit memory circuit, and she tells Din, sorry, no chance cubes, as in no dice. Chance cubes being the red and blue sided dice that Watto and Qui-Gon used to roll for Anakin and Shmi in Phantom Menace. Now, IG units were Empire era assassin droids, and now that the Empire's done with, there's not too many IG units left out there, except maybe IG-88, who is the assassin in The Empire Strikes Back. We don't know what happened to him. He could be out there somewhere. R5 backs away in fear from Din. He trembles, and Peli says that he served in the rebellion. Technically, R5 did kind of serve the rebellion by intentionally blowing that motivator at R2-D2's request so that R2 could go to Luke and Leia's stolen Death Star plans would make their way to Obi-Wan. So R5 did play an important role there. All this was covered in the Red One story from the anthology from a certain point of view. As Peli loads them all in later, I love out behind her, the pit droid swings the trash compactor pole around, forcing the other one to have to duck, and eventually just gets smacked in the head. They depart through the Boonta Eve fireworks, and it looks a hell of a lot better than a similar scene in Wonder Woman 84.
Is good, but it can be better.
R.I.P. Patty Jenkins' Star Wars movie. They made her get in that flight suit for nothing. So as they approach Mandalore, Din Djarin describes the planet to Grogu, saying it was once green and beautiful when the songs were written, but he says he's never actually been there. The surface of Mandalore was scorched in an event called the Mandalorian Cataclysm. This is long before any of the events we've seen. This was the final war between the Mandalorians and the Jedi. The Armorer referred to these wars in Chapter 8 from Season 1.
The songs of eons past tell of battles between Mandalore the Great and an order of sorcerers called Jedi.
Mandalore the Great was the first leader of the Mandalorian people. Din points to the moon of Concordia, that's his home and the home of the Death Watch that the Armorer mentioned in her history of A Night of a Thousand Tears in the Book of Boba Fett. He also mentions the planet Kalevala on the navigation screen, which is all part of the same system. Din tells Grogu that a Mandalorian has to understand maps and know their way around, and that way he'll never be lost. This sets up how Grogu is able to navigate back to Kalevala, and I guess R5 helps him out too. But on a deeper level, Din is explaining that core to being a Mandalorian is to be a homeless diasporic wanderer. When Bo-Katan told Din last episode, "Go home," it was a knowing insult. None of them can really go home, not even Bo-Katan and her empty husk of a castle. Stretching over the rocky landscape of the planet are these massive sections of the turquoise-colored crystal that we saw last episode, a pretty cruel mirage when you think about it. When you see green, you think it's gonna be vegetation, but no, it's on the other side of two destructions. This is formed by the sands of the planet being melted in the fusion blasts. As R5 rolls over to the cave, you see some smart use of the volume here. That's the 360-degree LED interior set that they shoot a lot of these things on. Notice there's a wet puddle surface that reflects the LED screen above showing the sky, but also reflects R5 as he rolls past. They use something practical and tangible, the R5 droid, to blend with what would otherwise just be a glowing backdrop, making the whole thing just feel more real to the viewer. These kind of tactics, along with characters having actual emotional connections with their environments, something you can feel even through their helmets, is why I think The Mandalorian has always gotten better use out of the volume than the Marvel Studios titles have. When R5 disappears, Mando tells Grogu to seal himself in his pod as Mando checks the atmospheric conditions, telling us that this new bassinet that Din got for Grogu is airtight and has its own breathing apparatus. I mean, this thing could probably go underwater and in space if it ever comes to that. As Din walks around outside, you can hear his suit's breather inhaling and exhaling, putting us inside of Din's helmet with him and giving us some real Darth Vader vibes, like an overall creepy sensation as we're exploring the surface. Grogu sits up in the cockpit looking concerned, and Din is able to sense this kid's eyes on him, so he turns around to reassure him. Din spelunks through this crystal cave, bathed in turquoise light from the glass above, giving this descent an aquatic feel, like Mando is already taking his first steps into those living waters. He looks out over the ruins of the covered city of Sindari, its 3D cityscape that we saw in Clone Wars, now covered in debris, but with natural light pouring in. Like the helmets worn by the Mandalorians of the Watch, the Mandalorians would encase their cities in other types of chrome domes, and now a crack in that shell has forced its way in, bringing in this green, symbolically mirroring the way a little green force of nature pierced Din's helmet and got him to open up. Din gets attacked by Alamites, who carry these weapons carved out of that same green glass, showing how they have adapted to the new planet's surface. Din ignites the Darksaber, and immediately the blade lowers in his hands, showing how he is still struggling with the weight of it, as he did in Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, in that butcher shop, and while fighting the armor in Paz Vizsla. Those scenes harken back to Rebels, Season 3, Episode 15, Trials of the Darksaber, when Sabine Wren trained with the Darksaber with Kanan Jarrus, and we learned one's ability to lift and use the Darksaber effectively is really a factor of the wielder's connection with the Kyber crystal inside.
The blade feels lighter.
You're connecting with it. It's becoming a part of you.
So Din Djarin still has not fully connected with it. So when he swings, he loses control, and now he takes a beating from one of the Alamites. Din's only able to fend it off, not with a Darksaber, but with a vibroblade to the leg. He continues to pathetically drag the Darksaber around on the ground and really gets most of his successful hits with punches, with jabs. But he finally stabs the final Alamite and deactivates a lightsaber, as if relieved to turn the thing off. And it leaves a vertical slit in the chest, a nice bit of continuity, since the Darksaber is a flat blade. It's not a cylindrical saber like other lightsabers are. Outside, Din has R5 run an analysis on the air, and the holo projection shows Aurebesh number 95%, I assume. The numbers in Aurebesh look mostly like Arabic numerals, and Din says Bo-Katan was right. Mandalore is not cursed. Generous of him to credit Season 2 Bo-Katan from Trask, and not the Bo-Katan he just talked to last episode, who said that there was nothing for them there, showing that he still believes in the hopeful Mandalorian inside. Now, watching something you love is self-care. It feels good, right? Well, with Geology, you can have that good feeling of self-care in your daily routine too. Geology is a 16-time award-winning personalized skincare company recognized in Men's Health, Esquire, and Ask Men grooming awards with over 6,000 5-star reviews. Just take a quick 30-second diagnostic quiz, and Geology will create a simple and effective skincare or hair care routine customized just for you, with ingredients that are dermatologist tested, proven to work, and personalized to your needs. For hair care, Geology's got strengthening shampoo and conditioner co-wash, which will transform your routine and deliver the best hair of your life. It extends the time between washes and replaces the need for so many products, so you can wash your hair less and save money. They also offer body washes and deodorants that are free of harsh ingredients, and they smell great. And for skincare, they have you covered from all angles. You can fight acne, reduce oilness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark or puffy under eyes, have smoother hydrated skin, and target signs of aging. Their daily personalized skincare routine comes with 2 face washes, morning face cream, retinol night cream, and eye cream. And right now, for a limited time, you can get a 5-piece trial set for only $15 if you use the code ROCKSTARS70 at checkout. That's over $50 of product for just $15, And on top of that, you'll get an additional bonus offer of one of their brand new skin, hair, and body products of your choice when you add it to your trial. To get started, just click the link in the description. Din descends using his jetpack while Grogu's floating bassinet can apparently defy any level of gravity. They pass various fauna on their way down. Just a little clue that not only wildlife exists down here, but there is a food chain, and thus something for an apex predator, a mythosaur, to feed on. As Qui-Gon says,
"There's always a bigger fish."
And Bo-Katan actually later says this episode that Alamites used to live on the wastelands on the outskirts of the town, and so if things can survive here, something else might be able to survive too. Din finds this area with half-buried Mandalorian armor, and Ludwig Göransson's flute comes back here. And I love how at first, the T-visor forms the shape of a pickaxe. But before we can even wonder who these Mandalorians were, it's revealed to all be a trap from this creature, who seems to have laid all this armor here as a treasure to spring the trap, using the Beskar armor bones of past Mandalorians who wander down here to catch future ones. This creature is gnarly. He's a fusion of mechanized parts, but one highly expressive, menacing eye. I love seeing how all of its insectoid segments interact with each other, its yellow tubes flopping around as it chirps like a beetle. Grogu tries to pry open the trap with the Force, but he draws the captor's attention and flees. As he floats back down this tunnel, he passes the predator creature that we saw before, and it suddenly snaps its gator jaws in the headlight, reminding me of the movie Alien when Dallas crawls through the Nostromo vent shafts and a xenomorph suddenly appears in his flashlight. On the way out, an Alamite jumps in front of Grogu, but Grogu, who's taken out a mudhorn before, has no time for this bullshit and Force slaps Four Eyes. Grogu then does a front flip into the cockpit. Fuck up! And that flying predator that snapped at him before had been chasing him the whole time. As they depart, I'm not really sure where Grogu's floating pod went on that starfighter. That's a pretty big, bulky pod. Starfighters aren't really meant to have a ton of room for storage. R5 pilots them back to Kalavara, and we return to Bo-Katan's throne room. Bo-Katan has adjusted her sitting position from a bored lounge to now a bowed head. And here in this shot, we do briefly see that engraved tableau on the other side of the throne, just one figure on the end of it. This may be a peaceful scene from the history of House Kryze to contrast the warring dog pile on the other side. Bo-Katan looks out the window and assumes it's Din Djarin in the starfighter and says, "Let's get rid of him once and for all." Yikes! Does Bo-Katan mean kill Din Djarin, or just threaten him so much he stays away from her forever? A conflict between these two characters is definitely being set up. She was ready to fight him. Bo-Katan fires up the Gauntlet. This is her Kamar-class fighter from Clone Wars, and she pilots down to the ruins of Sundari with a lot more confidence piloting through that storm, as if she's revisited the surface before. She looks upon the ruins with shame, telling Grogu,
"Didn't always look like this."
Structurally in this episode, I think it's interesting how Grogu walks this same path but with two different Mandalorian chaperones. It's almost like getting back-to-back tours of a haunted graveyard, given first by a guide who grew up on stories about this place, but then by someone who actually used to live there, in a graveyard. That metaphor didn't really make sense, but you get it. Bo-Katan looks out over the Civic Center and says, "This was once a beautiful civilization. My family ruled over it all. Now it's a tomb." She's referring to her house, House Kryze. Her father, Adonai Kryze, who was killed during the Great Clan Wars, which resulted in the militant traditionalists getting banished to Concordia, and they became the Death Watch. But when the father died, Bo-Katan's older sister, Duchess Satine Kryze, succeeded him. Satine was Obi-Wan's ill-fated love, who was killed by Maul with the Darksaber right in front of Obi-Wan. Bo-Katan tells Grogu, "I knew quite a few Jedi, you know. I don't know what they taught you about us, but there was a time when we actually got along quite well, fought side by side." Bo-Katan is referring to a lot of the past, the events of Clone Wars when she fought alongside Obi-Wan, after she left the Death Watch and turned on them, and then later in Season 7 when she and Ahsoka Tano retook Mandalore from Maul, and also when Bo-Katan appears in Rebels, she fought alongside Jedi like Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger. But it's interesting how she says, "I don't know what they told you about us." Grogu lived throughout most of that history, and Bo-Katan isn't that much older than Grogu. Bo-Katan fights a few Alamites using her lassos and her circular arm shields, slaying these guys even without the Darksaber. And on the last kill, she looks back to the camera and she asks Grogu, "Do you think your dad was the only Mandalorian?" I love this because Bo-Katan calls Din Djarin Grogu's dad. She sees it, we all see it. The captor drains Din Djarin of his blood while a little pump droid begins sucking out this fluid. Bo-Katan shoots the pump and engages the captor, lassoing the Darksaber and igniting it. Interestingly, not seeming to struggle with the weight as much as Din did. So should the Darksaber be won by combat? Or can someone who claims it a different way still connect with that Kyber crystal? Bo impales him through his central organs, like Obi-Wan blasting General Grievous's heart, but the captor detaches from the body and the head crawls away like a cockroach, which feels like an homage to John Carpenter's The Thing when the alien detaches the head and sprouts spider legs to crawl away. But Bo-Katan's able to use the Darksaber to slice apart the captor's larger droid attachment, first taking out its legs and then beheading it. Bo-Katan makes some pong soup for Din Djarin, which is so nice. Din insists he must follow his creed to find the living waters, saying the creed is all their scattered people have left. Bo-Katan says that their infighting made all the Mandalorians weak and enabled the Empire to smash them. And again, this infighting is really a tradition rooted in the Darksaber, something that, according to their tradition, must be won by combat, meaning one Mandalorian has to fight another Mandalorian to win it. Fighting in civil wars is just part of their history, and that really has been the curse of their people. So in that regard, the Darksaber represents the ultimate Mandalorian curse. It doesn't unite Mandalorians, it only divides them. So they enter the mines, and Bo-Katan says she actually visited these living waters when she was a girl. She recited these same creed words, but to her it was just a theatrical spectacle that the royal family did, as opposed to something that had any meaning. But for Din Djarin and for the armor, for the whole watch, there is true magic in these words. For Bo-Katan, it was just empty words. This is truly what this episode, The Mines of Mandalore, is really about. Are these mines empty, or is there something inside? And in the Living Waters chamber, Bo-Katan reads a Mandoa plaque. These mines date back to the age of the first Mandalore. According to ancient folklore, the mines were once a MYTHOSAUR lair. Mandalore the Great is said to have tamed the mythical beast. It is from these legends that the skull signet was adopted and became the symbol of our planet. I love it. It feels so educational, right? As if field trips would be brought through here. But Mandalore the Great is really the founder of this planet. This is a figure who existed in expanded universe, aka Legends fiction, but has survived into canon. It was the first guy who tamed and rode the MYTHOSAUR. But historically, the MYTHOSAUR were hunted into extinction by the first settlers of Mandalore and died off long before the great cataclysm that scorched the planet. And structurally, the end of this episode mirrors the beginning of episode 1 of this season, a Mandalorian baptism ceremony interrupted by a large beast coming up from beneath the waves. And that's what we see here in this Living Waters baptism. Din Djarin repeats the same words, but gets cut off at a specific moment. The kid was cut off when he promised never to take off his helmet. Din Djarin was cut off when he said that these words would be forged in his heart. It's almost like fate always intervenes to keep people from fully completing the words of this baptism, because the words themselves are not important, yet there is still some magic to the Mandalorian lore. I love how Bo-Katan turns off her helmet light to better see Din's light through the murk, but in doing this, she misses the massive MYTHOSAUR at first when she passes it. She doesn't notice until she ascends with Din in her arms. She sees a massive tusk and the eye and a growl coming through the water. As in legend, the MYTHOSAUR is gigantic. It's the size of a city, and it leaves us with so many questions. How is a MYTHOSAUR still alive? Are they aquatic or amphibious? Is it sustaining itself on just alamites and other fauna that wanders into the water? Did it start small and grow into this? Was it always down here? Was it down here on the day of Bo-Katan's baptism? Does it know her and remember her? Are there more MYTHOSAURs? And was it seen only by Bo-Katan, or did Din Djarin see it too? Did both of them need to be together for it to present itself? Circumstantially, that is absolutely true. Mandalorians needed to come together and help each other and save each other for them to find their ancestral beast. But what's interesting is, if Din Djarin was passed out, if he didn't see it, will he believe her? Is this going to be a wedge between them? Bo-Katan begins the season as a total skeptic, someone who used to put her faith in reclaiming the Darksaber, but when the Darksaber failed her, she lost her faith. But now, seeing the MYTHOSAUR has given her something greater and older than the Darksaber, something truer to the Mandalorian ancestry to believe in. The living waters of Mandalore are life. This actually might be the turquoise fluid that was poured in the opening shot of the season by the Armorer. And so we come back to the mystery of the Armorer. Did the Armorer know the MYTHOSAUR was down here when she sent Din Djarin to these waters? Did she do that to feed the beast with a human sacrifice? Something she does with many black sheep from her clan. Or could this have been a test by the Armorer to see if the MYTHOSAUR would present itself to a worthy Darksaber wielder? Comment down below with your thoughts. A reminder to subscribe to our new channel, The Deep Dive, and to get support us by grabbing something from nerdriot.shop. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EA Voss. Follow New Rockstars and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.